The fluorescent lights of Mr. Henderson's office hummed, a sound I'd associated with my 15 years at Apex Warehousing Solutions. But today, it sounded like a funeral dirge. I'd just laid out my case for a raise, my first in 5 years. Henderson leaned back, his face a mask of profound disappointment. "Frank," he said, the word dripping with condescension, "after everything this company has given you, that sounds remarkably ungrateful." The word hung in the air, a cold, sharp blade. I'd given them my back, my knees, my weekends. Ungrateful? He slid a pink slip across his polished desk. "We need loyalty here." My loyalty just walked out the door with me, but it was about to be replaced by something far more powerful. The engine of my 20-year-old truck was the only sound as I left the Apex lot for the last time. My first and only stop was the Rusty Anchor, a dive bar where the smell of stale beer and quiet desperation clung to the air. I found them in our usual corner booth, the only two people I could trust. There was Maria, a forklift driver with a spine of steel and 2 kids to feed. Next to her, young Leo, barely 25, with the strained eyes of a man who'd worked 3 years of forced overtime. He saw the cardboard box of my personal effects on the seat beside me. "No," he whispered, his face falling. "Henderson," I said, the name tasting like ash. "Called me ungrateful, then he showed me the door." Leo's fist hit the sticky table, making the glasses jump. "That son of a... he's been squeezing everyone for months!" Maria just stared at me, her gaze sharp, calculating. She was always the planner, the one who saw 3 moves ahead. "So what's the play, Frank?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. I leaned forward, the anger in my gut now a cold, hard resolve. "The play," I said, "is we remind them who really moves the damn boxes." Maria's question hung in the stale air between us, heavy with 15 years of my own history. I took a long pull from my beer, the taste doing nothing to wash away the bitterness in my throat. They saw my anger, but they didn't see the roots of it. They didn't know the Apex I'd signed on with. It wasn't always like this. When I started, Old Man Henderson was still in charge. He was a tough son of a gun, but his handshake was a contract. He knew your wife's name, asked about your kids. He'd walk the floor, not to check a stopwatch, but to see the work, to see the people. 10 years ago, my wife Sarah was in the hospital for a week. I never even had to ask. Old Man Henderson just pulled me aside and said, "Go. Your pay is covered. Your family comes first." That was Apex. That was loyalty. Then he retired, and his son took over, the one I just met. The one with the MBA and the soul of a spreadsheet. The first thing to go was the annual company picnic. "A frivolous expense," the memo said. Then they changed the health insurance, doubling our deductibles. They implemented a new attendance policy so strict you'd get a disciplinary mark for being 2 minutes late, even in a Cleveland blizzard. Little cuts. 1,000 paper cuts, bleeding us dry while Henderson Jr. put in a new putting green behind the executive offices. He talked about the Apex family in company-wide emails, but he'd stripped the meaning from the word, wearing his father's legacy like a cheap suit. I looked at Leo's worn-out face, at Maria's determined jaw. "He called me ungrateful," I repeated, my voice low and raw. "He's standing on a foundation his father built with men like us, and he's calling ungrateful." Leo shook his head. "I've only been here 3 years, and I've seen them cut our overtime pay twice. They just expect us to eat it." "They expect us to be scared," Maria corrected, her eyes locking onto mine. "They think if they cut one of us down, the rest will stay in line." "That's been the strategy," I confirmed, feeling a new, dangerous kind of energy ignite in my chest. "Isolate us. Make us feel like we're the only one with a problem. Make us feel powerless." I leaned in, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But what happens when we're not alone? What happens when every single driver, picker, and packer on that floor realizes their problem is the same as ours?" The flicker of understanding in their eyes was all I needed. The shock was wearing off, replaced by the slow-burning fuse of rebellion. Maria leaned forward, the strategist emerging. "Okay, Frank, I'm listening. But this is bigger than just the 3 of us. How do we even start?" "We don't start with a bang, Maria. We start with a whisper." Her eyes narrowed. "Explain." "Henderson wants us isolated," I said, tapping the table for emphasis. "So we connect. One conversation at a time. Off the clock, away from the cameras. We find the people who are respected. The ones who are tired of being squeezed. Leo nodded slowly. Like Carlos in shipping. He's been complaining about the new scheduling for weeks. Exactly, I said. You talk to Carlos, Leo. Maria, you handle the forklift crew, they trust you. I'll work the phones. I know everyone who's been there more than 5 years. We don't mention the "you" word yet, we just talk. We listen. We find out who's fed up enough to fight. The plan was simple, and that was its strength. For the next 2 weeks, we became ghosts, whispering in the cracks of Apex's foundation. Leo met guys in the parking lot after the night shift, sharing a cigarette and a quiet complaint. Maria turned break room grumbling into serious one-on-one talks. I spent my days in cheap coffee shops, my phone pressed to my ear, reconnecting with old-timers, gauging their temperature. Slowly, carefully, a network began to form. A spark of defiance was catching. We had a list of a dozen solid people, with another 20 leaning our way. We were ready for the next step, bringing a few key leaders together. And I knew just the man to be the anchor. Dave Kowalski. He'd been at Apex 5 years longer than me. A quiet, steady guy from receiving who'd seen it all. He was 2 years from retirement, and the recent cuts to his 401k match had hit him hard. He was our moral center. If Dave was in, others would follow. I met him at a diner halfway between our houses. The place smelled of fried onions and regret. "It's a damn shame what they did to you, Frank," he said, stirring his coffee. "It's not just me, Dave. You know what Henderson is doing. He's bleeding the place dry, and we're the ones paying for it." I laid it all out. The quiet talks, the growing frustration, the idea of having a real voice for ourselves. He listened, his brow furrowed. He agreed with every word. But I saw the fear in his eyes, the tremor in the hand holding his mug. "I've got grandkids, Frank," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "My pension. It's all I have. 2 more years." "This is for your pension, Dave," I urged, leaning in. "So there's still a company left to pay it. We need you. People trust you." He looked out the window, at the gray Cleveland sky. He was silent for a long, heavy moment. Finally, he turned back, a look of grim resignation on his face. "Okay, Frank," he said. "Count me in." A wave of relief washed over me. This was it. The keystone was in place. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Maria, her voice tight with panic. "Frank, you won't believe this. They just fired Carlos." My blood ran cold. "What? On what grounds?" They didn't give one. 2 security guards just walked him out of the building, in front of the whole morning shift. They made a show of it. Her voice dropped. "And that's not all. There are new signs plastered everywhere. 0 tolerance for activities disruptive to the Apex family. Henderson is holding a mandatory all-hands meeting this afternoon." I sank into a kitchen chair, the phone feeling like a block of ice in my hand. It was too fast, too precise. It was a surgical strike. He knew. Henderson knew exactly who to target. And there was only one person outside of our core group who knew we were targeting Carlos. Dave. The quiet, steady man. The moral center. He hadn't gone to our people. He'd gone straight to Henderson. The keystone hadn't been set. It had been used to smash our foundation. The betrayal was a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. Dave, 2 years from retirement. He hadn't just betrayed me. He'd sold out every person on that floor for the illusion of safety. My first instinct was to rage, to put my fist through the drywall, but a cold clarity washed over me instead. Henderson made a mistake, a big one. Panic was a luxury we couldn't afford. "Frank, are you there?" Maria's voice was frayed with panic. "We have to warn everyone. Tell them to lay low, it's over." "No," I said, my own voice surprising me with its steadiness. "It's just getting started. Don't call anyone. Don't do anything yet." "What? Frank, they're hunting us. They took Carlos." "He's not hunting us, Maria. He's trying to scare the flock. I explained, pacing my small kitchen. The gears in my head were turning, clicking into a new, more dangerous alignment. Firing Carlos in front of everyone. The threatening signs. This mandatory meeting, it's a performance. It's theater designed to make people feel alone and terrified. I stopped pacing. He thinks he's cut the head off the snake. He has. We're exposed. He's wrong, I said, the words tasting like iron. He thinks the problem is a few whispers in the dark. He doesn't understand the problem is the darkness itself. And he just handed us a spotlight. A confused silence on the other end of the line. I let it hang for a second before continuing. He's putting every single employee in one room. He's gathering our entire army for us. He's gonna stand up there and lecture them about family and loyalty, right after they watched a good man get walked out like a criminal. He's making our case better than we ever could. The panic in her voice subsided, replaced by a dawning comprehension. You want to use the meeting? We're going to weaponize it, I corrected. We can't be in that room, but our message will be. Leo, you still with us? Leo's voice, tight with anger, finally crackled through the phone. Yeah, I'm here. What's the plan? Henderson wants to give a speech. We're going to give him an audience that's ready for a different one. Meet me at the diner, 1 hour. Bring a list of every person who's on our side. He declared war. It's time we showed him what a real fight looks like. The betrayal still burned in my gut, but now it was fuel. Dave hadn't smashed our foundation, he just told us exactly where to place the dynamite. The diner booth felt like a war room. The air, thick with the smell of burnt coffee, crackled with nervous energy. Leo was drumming his fingers on the table, a frantic rhythm of anxiety. Maria sat perfectly still, her hands clasped, but I could see the tension in her knuckles. He played us, Frank. Leo blurted out, his voice a low hiss. He used Dave to get Carlos's name, and now he's going to use this meeting to scare everyone into silence. We're done. No, I said, leaning forward, my voice low and firm, forcing them both to meet my gaze. Henderson thinks he's playing chess. He thinks he just took our queen. But we're not playing chess. We're lighting a fire. And he just built the bonfire and gathered all the kindling for us. Maria's eyes narrowed. I'm with you, Frank, but what's the move? We can't get into that meeting. We're locked out. Exactly, I said, a grim smile touching my lips. We're ghosts, and ghosts can go anywhere. I pulled a napkin from the dispenser and grabbed a pen from my pocket. He expects a speech. He expects everyone to stand there, heads down, terrified. He's counting on their fear. We're going to give them something else to hold on to. We're going to give them a question. I scribbled on the napkin and slid it across the table. In block letters it read, They fired Carlos. Who's next? Coppered profits. No raises. Ask Henderson why. Are you ungrateful or are you underpaid? Leo read it. His finger drumming stopped. Maria's eyes scanned the words, a flicker of understanding igniting in her expression. Flyers, she whispered. Anonymous. Untraceable. I confirmed. We print a few hundred of these. Simple, black and white. We don't mention unions. We don't mention organizing. We just put their own fears, their own secret complaints, right there on paper. We make them realize they're not alone. Leo's head came up. But how do we get them in there? Security's on high alert. That's where our network comes in, I said, pulling out the list of names we'd so carefully compiled. The dozen people we know are solid. We're not asking them to stand up and fight. Not yet. We're asking them to do something small, something invisible. Maria, you call your people on the day shift. Tell them to meet you in the parking lot in 20 minutes. Leo, you get the night shift guys who are just coming in. I'll run the copies. I looked at them both, letting the weight of the moment settle. The meeting is in 2 hours. We're going to hit them 30 minutes before it starts. A coordinated blitz. These flyers go on the back of every bathroom stall door. Tucked under the windshield wipers of the cars in the lot. Left on the tables in the break room. Slipped onto the seats in the warehouse where they're holding the meeting. By the time Henderson steps up to that podium, we want every single person in that room to have seen one. We want those questions echoing in their heads while he's feeding them lies about family. Maria took a deep breath, the strategist in her taking over. It's risky. If anyone gets caught, it's riskier to do nothing, I cut in, my voice hard as steel. Right now, they're all scared and alone. Henderson is going to pick them off one by one, just like he did with Carlos. This. I tap the napkin. This tells them they're not alone. It connects them right under his nose. It's a silent protest. It's the first shot. Leo's fear was finally burning away, replaced by a cold fire. He nodded slowly. A silent protest. I like it. Good, I said, standing up and tossing a $10 bill on the table. Let's go to work. The next 90 minutes were a blur of calculated chaos. I stood over the noisy copier at a corner print shop, the smell of toner and ozone filling my lungs as sheet after sheet of our simple, powerful questions spat out into the tray. My phone was pressed to my ear as I relayed instructions, my voice a low, steady hum against the machine's rhythm. I could picture it perfectly. Maria, meeting two trusted forklift operators by the dumpsters, passing them a stack of papers with a quiet, urgent nod. Leo, talking to a young packer near the time clock, slipping a bundle of flyers into the kid's backpack. They were activating our network, not with a call to arms, but with a request for a quiet act of defiance. With 20 minutes to go before the meeting, I drove my old truck into the far corner of the Apex parking lot, my heart pounding a steady, heavy beat against my ribs. I couldn't be seen, but I had to watch. I saw them, our people, moving like shadows. A flicker of white paper left on a car windshield. A figure slipping out of the side entrance. Their task complete. They had done it. The seeds were sown. From my vantage point, I watched as the workers began to file into the main warehouse bay for Henderson's mandatory meeting. They walked with their shoulders slumped, their heads down, the very picture of defeat he was hoping for. But I knew something he didn't. I knew that in their pockets, in their minds, they were carrying our questions. Henderson was about to address a room full of individuals. He had no idea he was actually facing an army waiting for a signal, and we had just given it to them. All we could do now was wait for the explosion. My phone vibrated on the passenger seat, a lifeline to the battle I couldn't see. A text from Maria. He's on stage. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. My whole body was a coiled spring of tension. For 15 years, I'd been inside that warehouse. Now, I was an outsider, a ghost haunting the parking lot, waiting for a signal I wasn't even sure would come. Another text. This time, from Leo. Chuck's smug bastard. Talking about shared sacrifice. Asterisk, shared sacrifice. I snorted. The sound harsh, in the quiet cab of my truck. Henderson's idea of shared sacrifice was him giving up a second caddy so he could afford to cut our benefits. Maria's next text was a single word. Ungrateful. He'd said it, the trigger word. The insult he'd hurled at me, now thrown at a room full of people who were simmering with the questions we'd planted in their minds. I imagined the word hanging in the air, thick and oily, just like it had in his office. But this time, it wasn't just for me. It was for everyone. I held my breath, waiting. The silence from my phone stretched into an eternity. Had it failed? Had his threats and the public execution of Carlos worked? Did fear win? Then, the phone buzzed, a long, frantic vibration. It was Maria calling. I snatched it up. What's happening? Her voice was a breathless, triumphant whisper. You are not going to believe this. Shirley. Shirley from packing. I knew Shirley, a woman in her late 60s, quiet as a mouse, worked the line for 20 years. She wouldn't say boo to a goose. What about her? I demanded. He said the word, Frank. Ungrateful. And the whole room was dead quiet. Then Shirley, she just held up one of the flyers. Didn't say a word. Just held it up. He tried to ignore her, but then someone else held one up. And another. Frank, within 10 seconds, it was like a forest of white paper. 100 people, just holding up your questions in total silence. I closed my eyes, a wave of profound relief washing over me. A silent protest, more powerful than any shouting match. He lost it, Maria continued, her voice cracking with a laugh. Started turning red, sputtering about insubordination. He demanded to know who started this. And that's when it got even better. How? Dave Kowalski. He was sitting right in the front row, trying to look like the loyal company man. Henderson points right at him. Dave, you know about this, don't you? Tell me who's responsible. He put him on the spot in front of everyone. My blood ran cold, and Dave just crumbled, she said. He stood up, looking around, and nobody would meet his eyes. The whole room just stared at him. Cold. Silent. The look on his face, Frank. He was a ghost. He just shook his head and sat back down without saying a word. Henderson called his name again, but he wouldn't look up. He broke him. The silence broke him. Natural justice. It wasn't a punch or a threat. It was the weight of 100 pairs of eyes, showing him exactly what his betrayal had cost. He hadn't just sold out a few friends. He'd sold out the entire room, and they were letting him know it. The meeting's over, Maria said. He just stormed off the stage. People are leaving. I see them, I said, watching the warehouse doors open. But the people walking out weren't the same ones who had walked in. The slump was gone from their shoulders. Their heads were up. They were clustered in angry, buzzing groups, waving the flyers, their faces alive with a sense of shared purpose. They weren't defeated. They were furious. And they were united. I saw Dave Kowalski emerge, a man adrift in a sea of his own making. He walked alone, a wide bubble of space around him as people instinctively moved away. He looked shrunken, a decade older than he had that morning in the diner. A few minutes later, Maria and Leo were at my truck door. Leo was practically vibrating with adrenaline. It was beautiful, man. Like watching a king get dethroned by his own peasants. Maria was calmer, but her eyes shone with a fierce light. He made a mistake, Frank. He thought we were a dozen angry workers. He just learned we're the entire damn company. I looked past them, at the crowd still gathered in the parking lot. The whispers we'd started were now a roar I could almost hear through the glass. Henderson hadn't just failed to put out the fire. He'd poured gasoline on it. He declared war. I said, the engine of my truck turning over with a familiar growl. And he gathered our army for us. I looked at my two friends, my co-conspirators. The first phase was over. It's time to make a call. Let's go find a union organizer. We didn't go to a diner. We went straight to my kitchen table, the three of us huddled around my cell phone on speaker. The air was electric. I found the number for the regional organizers of warehouse workers and dialed, my thumb steady. A gruff voice answered on the third ring. Ben Carter. Mr. Carter, my name is Frank Miller. I was a floor supervisor at Apex Warehousing Solutions for 15 years. Was? The word was flat, skeptical. He'd heard 1,000 stories from disgruntled ex-employees. They fired me last week, I said. Today, the general manager held a mandatory meeting to threaten the entire staff into silence. It didn't work. I let Maria take over, her voice a rapid-fire account of the past 2 hours. The flyers, the silent protest, Henderson's meltdown. I could practically hear the man on the other end of the line sit up straighter. Let me get this straight, Carter said, the skepticism gone, replaced by a sharp, focused intensity. You got 100 people to stage a coordinated silent protest with zero prep time, and the boss ran off the stage? That's about the size of it, Leo chimed in. The whole parking lot is still buzzing. They're ready. Before Carter could respond, Leo's phone buzzed violently on the table. He glanced at the screen, his face hardening. It's from inside, he said, reading the text aloud. Henderson just posted a notice. Shirley and 2 of the guys from shipping who held up flyers first are suspended indefinitely, pending an investigation into disruptive activities. A cold fury settled over the room. It was a clumsy, panicked retaliation, an intimidation tactic. I picked up my phone. Mr. Carter, I said, my voice low and hard. He just gave us our first martyrs. He's trying to scare them back into their cages. There was a pause, then the sound of a chair scraping on the other end. He didn't scare them, Mr. Miller. He just signed their union cards for them. Don't go anywhere. I'm 10 minutes away. The call ended. We looked at each other across the table. The moral victory was exhilarating, but it was over. Henderson had just drawn a new line in the sand, not with threats, but with the livelihoods of 3 good people. The whispers were done. The real battle had just begun. When was a time you were made to feel ungrateful at work for simply asking for what you deserved? Let's hear the stories in the comments.